Hi, hello, and welcome. I'll cut straight to the chase. If you're looking for the Nintendo Switch 2 review only for Cyberpunk 2077, you can look down in the description below and jump to that timestamp, or you can go to this time right here. It will take you all the way through up to that point of the video. You can watch it, be on your way, decide what you want to do with the game, and have a good day. If you're looking for more than just how does it run on the Nintendo Switch 2, then sit back, make sure your controllers are charged, and let's jump into the interesting history that is Cyberpunk 2077. Almost 5 years ago, in December of 2020, Cyberpunk 2077 released to the general public. I remember the reviews going out, and it was a little bit concerning because they were very restricted, and it was only PC reviews. But this was from a company that made The Witcher 3 and made these other games that were really good. CD Projekt Red, up until this point, for me, hadn't really missed. And then the game released, and it was a cluster. The game launched horribly on the Xbox One and PS4, in which it was supposed to be launching for. It was that generation of systems. Now, it seemed on the PC it was definitely a lot better, and that's why the review codes went out for that, and everybody was like, wow, this game's pretty good. It's not great where we thought it would be, but it's really good. The console versions had a really horrible launch, and there was a lot of misinformation, just a really bad launch all around. Honestly, it was really disappointing because I really like CD Projekt Red. I love The Witcher 3. I love that they added some stuff in there. I love the DLC that they added to Witcher 3. I was just a huge fan of that game and thought, wow, they're doing another big game like that. This has to be good. Fun fact, I received Cyberpunk 2077 as a Christmas gift that year. I did not open it until this year, 2025. I remember when we started to see the console gaming footage, and I was so disappointed. I was like, wow, I guess I'm not going to be getting that game anytime soon. I have so much other stuff to play. Okay, that sucks, but whatever. I had forgotten it was on my Christmas wish list, and I got it. It stayed in the wrap until 2025, until I finally decided to open it up, and I actually got the DLC for it, Phantom Liberty.
There were various game-breaking bugs, glitches throughout, frame rate issues, and so much more wrong with this launch. But on top of the technical issues, the game itself was just not what players had expected. This was an even larger scale than the infamous No Man's Sky controversy that happened in 2016. Just go look that up and see how hilariously awful that was. Crowds were incredibly sparse on consoles, the game was largely a bore to most players, and things just didn't work correctly in almost every facet. Full disclosure, I can only base my perspective on this whole situation from a purely personal disappointment, from written articles I had read and watching the various video footage which you are seeing now.
So what in the hell happened with this game? Seriously. Like, the game was a commercial success. It sold a boatload. I want to say it was like 20 million units or something. It sold like crazy. And honestly, this is probably why the developer didn't go under, is because it sold so well. The shareholders didn't care that it was released in a garbage state. They cared about, we got units sold, meaning we got money, we're happy with you. This is also probably why CD Projekt Red was able to continue fixing and updating the game years and years after it was launched. In fact, you could argue that the game finally launched how it should have in 2023. Even though this game was a commercial success and the devs ended up fixing the game years later, there were still some losses. For instance, the multiplayer. Apparently there was a multiplayer that they announced that was going to be part of this game. It was separate from the single player, but it would have been its own thing with the game itself. That just disappeared. They ended up canceling it because they had to focus on fixing the game and making it function on consoles and making it better for PC. I have to think that this is due to executives and board members and all that garbage, and they just had to fart it out into the world because they needed money. I really can't believe that CD Projekt Red would look at this and go, our PC version's okay, our console versions are also okay? Those damn corpo rats and their bullshit, what a bunch of gonks. In September of 2023, CD Projekt Red released a literal game-changing patch 2.0 that would completely change the game and various aspects of it. I can't imagine anything other than what I've played now. Shortly after, they also released Phantom Liberty, which was the big DLC that they had planned to release after the game launch. So in 2023, the game finally reached where it was supposed to have been back in 2020, a whole 3 years later. And I always found it interesting to see that the game was getting re-reviewed during that time, and I thought, why are they doing this instead of just a quick little add-on to their previous reviews? Apparently, this patch changed it so drastically that it warranted new reviews like this was a new game. That's wild to me that happened 3 years later, but whatever, it is what it is. So that's what happened. Cyberpunk 2077 started like garbage, got better over time, and then finally truly launched in 2023 alongside the DLC.
With all these updates, it still wasn't enough for me to jump in. I was still incredibly cranky about how it all went down, even though that did absolutely nothing to teach the executives and shareholders who most likely caused the damn problem. Fast forward to 2025, and I finally decided to open up my copy of Cyberpunk 2077 and play through it. Hell, I even got the DLC, on discount of course, to experience that. This was all due to a handful of people recommending the game to me. My curiosity got the best of me, and I began my journey into being a punk. When a Switch 2 version of Cyberpunk 2077 was announced, my first thought was, ooh, that's gonna run like butt, isn't it? Then, when they showed the game off and mentioned that it was only a 6-month build, I got very curious. The final push to pick this up is due to the fact that CDPR put the entire game, all DLC, and most importantly, all patches into a single cartridge. The physical collector in me was very pleased, and I wanted to show my support for true physical games instead of game key cards. On Switch 2 launch night, I picked up my copy of Cyberpunk 2077 and dove in. When I booted up the game, I was recording on my TV in my office. This is the standard TV I use for capturing direct footage of games, and I use it for various consoles. I tested out the cross-save feature, and as soon as I logged into my CDPR account, my saves came right over and I was able to start. This worked wonderfully, and it was relatively easy. I gotta say, I'm a huge fan of this and hope other developers and publishers pay attention. Something else I found too were that there were Nintendo Switch 2 specific features that were added into the game. Things like touchscreen support, mouse controls, motion controls, things like that. Oh, and the gyro aiming. And I tried it out, and it's really good. I'm very impressed with what they did here and what they added in when they didn't really need to. I jumped into my level 60 character, and I was not impressed. I was in Dogtown, and it was stuttering a bit. As I drove around, there would be bigger hiccups along with really jarring audio tears. I quickly realized it wasn't the game performance itself, it was when the game was auto-saving, which it does a lot when you're driving around. When walking around, I was greeted with a hilarious bug of an NPC levitating off the ground. I realized very quickly that the game was in quality mode. That was why it seemed off to my eyes. That had to be it. I jumped into the menu, switched the handheld mode to performance, but then I couldn't switch TV mode. What the hell, Choom? Then I read the details. In order to play performance mode on a TV, you must have a 120Hz refresh rate available on the TV itself. This didn't make any sense to me. So my initial interaction with the game on Switch was disappointing almost all around. But, hold on. Don't throw out your LOL told you PC's better and put away your Nintendo pitchforks. There's a happy ending here. After recording footage, I hopped into handheld mode, and this is where the game shined. Goodness, it was a night and day difference. The game performs so much better. It stays largely at 40 frames per second to my eye, and the smaller screen helps to hide the jaggies that appear when driving around the city. I had a great time playing Cyberpunk 2077 in handheld mode, and the HDR looked very good, which is great. When I played on PS5, I had to turn the HDR off completely because it seemed to be broken and made the game look much worse. Then, after seeing how different it played, I decided to try on my TV that does have 120Hz as an option. I popped the Switch 2 into the dock, the game appeared on the screen almost immediately, and I was further greeted with good news. It ran and looked so much better than my initial experience. Is this better than the PS5 or Series X versions of the game? Why even compare? Of course not. If you want the highest fidelity, invest in a PC or one of those consoles. But the difference between quality is a much smaller gap than the Switch was to, say, the PS4 and the Xbox One. I am planning on playing through the entirety of Cyberpunk on the Switch 2, and I believe it is a viable option. From what footage I've seen, so take this with a grain of salt, it's much better on Switch 2 than the last gen versions of the game, and better than comparable handhelds to the Switch 2, but definitely inferior to the current gen consoles and a high mid to high end PC. This is great to see, and even better that I now have a physical version of this game that I don't ever have to worry about downloading patches for it just to be functional. Unfortunately, my start with the game was, well, it was rough. I played about 2 to 3 hours and was incredibly bored. I didn't like the menus. Honestly, I still don't like the menus since I played on console and they were clearly developed for mouse usage. There was too much chaos going on with the screen. I didn't really care for the protagonist, which, is kind of a big problem. In fact, I wasn't liking it so much that I almost just stopped and put it on my small list of did not finish games. But I took a breather from the game and pressed on. Once a key story event happened, I was hooked. It finally clicked, and the rest followed. Gameplay, how leveling up works, the skill trees, and everything else. I learned to embrace the chaos of the music, constant ads, and sounds thrown at me in Night City, and connect with characters. I even began to grow a connection to the protagonist. The game for me takes way too long to get going. I'm sure there are some who were immediately gripped from the start, and there are definitely some highlights. I mean, who doesn't like Jackie? But it really is a lot of story layout to get through. In this regard, for any new players, I highly recommend just pressing forward with the story to the major event. You'll know which one I'm talking about. My problem was that I have gaming ingrained in my brain. I look around every corner, look for anything to grab, and took way too long to get to the point the game truly opens up. Once opened though, you as the player really do have the ability to play and become who you want in the game. There are different play styles and character builds to try. Your interactions with characters can affect quests later on in the game. How you respond to tough situations will dictate different endings and various other story threads along the way. You effectively become the main character. The 2.0 patch that arrived back in 2023 apparently changed the game mechanics at their core. See, I didn't play before that patch, but I can't imagine the game functioning any differently than it does currently. You level your character up by doing specific actions within each skill. There are plenty of skills, so leveling up individual traits as well as general character level is fluid and works incredibly well. These actions don't necessarily have to be tied to combat either. For instance, the Netrunner skill is dependent on how you use your cyberware, the enhancements that turn you into more than just a regular old meatbag, and can potentially level up if you say, hack a camera or distract a guard that isn't your direct enemy yet. In addition, doing side or main missions helps the character to grow as well. This system is very well done and constantly rewards the player for however they want to play. In my first playthrough, I chose to be a quick and elegant fighter who doesn't sneak around much. I focused on my shinobi skills and used a katana along with an assault rifle to get things done. I know, very elegant, right? But the character customization doesn't stop there, choom. There is an entire skill and perks tree. There are 5 main perk categories that you can level up to make your build to be exactly what you want it to be, along with the 6th that I assume is more tied to the DLC that is purchased separately, Phantom Liberty. Honestly, the DLC perk tree kind of sucks, but the others are fantastic character upgrades. So to give you an example with my first run build, I focused a lot on the body and reflexes perk. By leveling up each perk, it opened up new areas for me to add additional skills. I was able to add things like healing while running and avoiding gunfire. My favorite skill I was able to unlock was one where if I held up my katana in the defensive position, I would reflect bullets back to where I was looking. I cannot tell you how many enemies I took down by simply moving toward them slowly and reflecting their own fire back at them. But the issue came up that I would run out of stamina very quickly. So I was able to improve my stamina amount as well as how quickly it would regenerate. This is where Cyberpunk 2077 shines. There is no wrong way to create your character. You can be as crazy as you want, and as long as you play with your build in mind, you'll consistently be rewarded by experience, leveling, and just incredibly fun gameplay. Something else I truly appreciate in the game is that there are very few limitations with the gameplay itself. Sure, there are some missions that want you to be sneaky or not kill anyone, but you do not have to do them that way. Sure, there may be consequences, but you have the choice. Similarly, interactions with characters are the same. An example that immediately sticks out in my mind is a mission that concludes much further in the game. There were a couple of missions previously that were all tied to this direct storyline, and the final quote-unquote mission is to deliver a data shard to someone who had been tied to this quest. She asked you if you looked at what's on the shard. I totally did. So my first answer was a lie. I was playing a character that could be trusted to get the job done, but only a handful of people could actually trust me. The NPC already knew I had looked because they were an expert netrunner, so she called me out on it. I did complete the job, so she did pay me, but she paid an incredibly small amount. I wanted to see what would happen if I told her the truth. I reloaded my save and told the truth in the same situation. She expressed her anger, but then got over it and paid me the full amount. I absolutely love this. Yes, my actions have consequences, but the game doesn't drive you or tell you how you should play. Honestly, after seeing so much there is in this game and each of the different endings you can do, I'm amazed how the developers created this game. It makes my head start to spin thinking how they had to tie all these storylines together, both small and large, and all the different responses and dialogue that triggers depending on your choices. It's truly an accomplishment that goes a very long way to immerse the player into this world. The gameplay is fully dependent on your choices and character build, but there are generally two different types of gameplay: exploration and combat. Exploration involves things like finding spots on a map that are typical to an open world game, driving around and checking all the alleyways in Night City. It's pretty straightforward, but I highly recommend leaving the beaten path every now and then while you navigate through main missions and the awesome side missions that will pop up throughout your playthrough. Combat, again, depends largely on your character choices. For me, because of my build, I did a lot of close quarters combat and dashing around the place. How you play can be so vastly different, it is wonderful that there are so many options. One person I spoke with said they use the Sandevistan build. I won't ruin what that is, but you should also go check out the Netflix show Edgerunners, which is based on this game world. Anyway, they would just be in never-ending slow mode, taking down enemies before those enemies even realize what happened. Another friend used a lot of firepower, but it was more mid-range fighting. You are the master of how you want to play, and again, there is no wrong way to do so. Cyberpunk 2077 does suffer a little from what I like to call open world syndrome, where there are things on the map to simply check off. It also has loads of text shards to read if you're into that, but I found it to be more of a bloat than anything. And though Night City is clearly a crafted world, which immediately makes it much better than most generalized open world games, I didn't ever really connect with it. This is probably because the game is meant to take place here in Southern California, specifically the LA area. I hate LA. Like, you don't understand how much I hate that place. So that's probably why I never latched on to Night City. Regardless, it gets the job done and offers a great sandbox for you to explore. Plus, because the developers continued to work and patch this game over the years, the crowds in Night City became more plentiful. On PC, it was a better experience from the start, but it was awful on consoles at launch. Now, if you're in one of the heavily populated areas of the city, you will see plenty of NPCs just strolling around and living their incredibly depressing lives. Night City really does feel alive now, and once I finally connected with the protagonists in the story, I truly felt the urge to become somebody, become a legend, so that others would remember the name V.
Finally, in 2025, I can not only recommend this game, I can highly recommend this game, and I can highly recommend the DLC Phantom Liberty to go along with it. In fact, if you are planning to play this, I do recommend getting both. You don't need to, but the DLC does add some extra stuff, and it just fits in so incredibly well that it makes me wonder that maybe they cut it out, worked on it, and put it back in. I hope that's not the case. This is a game that, though the story beats are largely the same, you really play how you want to play. You become who you want to become. How you play is how you choose to play. The choices you make with missions, the choices you make in character interactions, the choices you make with your skill tree and your perks and all of that stuff really is up to you. In Cyberpunk 2077, you really get to choose how you live in this fast-paced cybernetic world. It's great for it, and it's truly an experience to behold. And the cool thing about it is, every playthrough you do, if you choose different things, if you choose a different core background, anything, it will feel different. And in this world, you are the master of your own legend. The real question then becomes, what does that legend tell about you?